Hello friends, followers and channel members, welcome back to the channel. Now, do you remember how REX Atmos for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 completely transformed how the sim looked? It was amazing. Honestly, it blew me away from the very first time I used it. After that, I never flew without it. But now we're in Flight Sim 2024 and Microsoft and Zobo have caught up with the visuals. A lot of what Atmos used to fix is now already built in. So the big question is, will REX Atmos Core still bring anything new to the skies of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, or is it just chasing a sim that has already got ahead? Well, in this video, let's find out. I'm going to show you some real comparisons, tweak the settings live, and give you my honest first impressions of REX Atmos Core for Flight Sim 2024, and I'll warn you now that it's not quite the upgrade that I was hoping for. This video has actually turned out to be quite long, for which I do apologise, but I have been rather thorough, as you will soon see. If you haven't got a chance to watch all this video just now, want to jump to the conclusion, then head to around the 26-minute mark. And this then is the main menu, which for those of you who use REX Atmos for Flight Simulator 2020, this will look very familiar. There are three different areas which the program affects. That is the weather and the atmosphere, and finally the environment. Notice at the moment my Flight Simulator is not running, so it says awaiting simulator, and so everything is grayed out. So let's fire up the Flight Sim and see if this works as well as it did in Flight Sim 2020. So now with the sim loaded up and active, as we can see, we've got access to all the different settings: weather, atmosphere and environment. Now you will need to create a particular set that you think looks good for your setup and whatever colours your monitor is set to display. Everyone is going to be slightly different, but essentially what we're going to be looking for is the most realistic colour set. When this item gets released, once you've created your preset that you like, you'll actually be able to share it with the community, so you'll be able to use other people's presets and share your own. Let's have a look then by jumping in straight to the weather setting, and we'll look to create one now. There are three different versions of the weather settings: one for if you're using live weather, one for if you want to use the meta for a particular airport, and custom weather. I'm going to start with the custom weather. Now, I don't actually believe that there is much merit to having this, because the custom weather here is very similarly set and built up to the custom weather setup that you also have here in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This one where you would just basically choose which one you'd want, and there you go. Let me just pop that back to live weather for the time being. There is, I believe, little reason in having this. There is a little bit more advanced stuff you can do with the special tab you can see here: visual cloud enhancement, luminescence and things. But again, this is not usable for live weather, and as I fly live weather most of the time, which I believe most of you will do, then again I just don't see too much need for this particular part of the add-on. If we do have a quick look, and just to give it a full review, let's just turn the live weather off, so we've got basically clear skies here at Manchester. And then if I just go into the simple settings of this, we can select a general weather condition, and you can see it's starting to bring clouds in, and if I make it too bad, then there you are, it's raining, misty and foggy, hurricane conditions. So these are just sort of scattered showers now. We can also enable high cloud generation, which should add some cirrus clouds and things like that. You can then go through and select if you want precipitation, thunderstorms, snow, etc. Affect all the same things you can in the default weather engine, but then what you can do, this is something you can't change in Microsoft Flight Simulator, that is the cloud softness, from soft to harsh. There we go, we can see much harder cauliflower heads with the cumulus, and cloud variability as well. You can obviously play with that a little bit. Now, I do like this fact, and this is where REX Atmos 2020 was really neat, because it had this setting, and that is where you could tweak it to get the most realistic looking clouds, which was very nice. The downside I have found with this is this cloud softness, cloud variability, and visual cloud enhancement tools. They are only really there here if you are creating your own weather set rather than using live weather. This for me is a big letdown. We'll come on to the live weather in a few minutes, but let me just reset all of that back to our clear skies. And we'll go back out of the custom weather because, yeah, that is nice to have, but probably wouldn't use it too often. Maybe for content creation videos to make it look pretty. The meta weather then, well, this is again just an option which, whilst it was available in Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, I still don't think it's particularly relevant. Basically, all you would be doing is, I'm here at Manchester, and I could type in Manchester's meta if I wanted, and that should hopefully then bring it up. You could inject that weather, and there it is, it's brought in. The problem with this is that now puts Manchester's weather around the entire world in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is incredibly unrealistic and not something that I would want to do. If you may be doing base training or something like that, well, then you could potentially use that because you're only staying at one particular airport. But you can see that is the weather that REX Atmos has brought in for Manchester. If we just have a quick look at that, and then if I reset that and just brought in Azobo's default live weather, and it brings that in. Well, funnily enough, there's a live stream going off at Manchester at the moment, and I'll be honest with you, this actually looks more realistic compared to what I'm seeing on the live stream. So yeah, Again, I'm not particularly a fan of the meta weather feature. Nice to have, but would you use it? Well, you guys let me know if you'd use either of these two down in the comments below. Okay, so we're going to leave the live weather on from Azobo, the default live weather, that's on in the background, and that is because this is what I'm really interested in, the live weather option. Now let's go and have a look at creating a preset for when you're using live weather. And of course, this doesn't have to be the live weather from Azobo, it will also apply to third-party weather engines as well. So let's go and create one of these. Now this was the part I was really looking forward to, and sadly this is also the part where I found a lot of frustration. Now, at the time that I'm reviewing REX Atmos Core, there's no manual available to explain exactly what everything does, so it has been a bit of trial and error, but there are quite a few more settings here compared to what there was in REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, and I'll be honest with you, that's not a good thing. So let me explain. If I just move this over here so we can have a look at what's actually going on screen behind us. So we have to begin with the weather impact scale. By default it is 100. That is, it's going to allow as much weather in as Microsoft Flight Simulator is doing. This is the default setting. You can actually change this though. What you can do is you can sort of downgrade the weather. If you think, well, that's actually a little bit too much cloud for what I'm seeing compared to a live stream or whatever. Or wherever you're particularly living and looking out the window, you can reduce the amount of live weather you're getting. You'll see that's just changed a little bit in the background and go down a little bit more. So you're sort of altering the amount of live weather that Microsoft Flight Simulator or whatever other weather engine you're using is putting into the sim, which is quite nice because sometimes the weather that other weather engines put in might be a little bit over the top. If I'm being completely honest, actually this doesn't look too bad compared with the live conditions outside the window at the moment. So you can just go the other way as well, and obviously that will then bring in what is definitely far too much. Do I see a benefit in having this? I'll be honest with you, probably not too much. Yes, I suppose we could just scale that back a little bit, but every live weather scenario is going to be a little bit different. What looks good now might not look good tomorrow. We also have a mode, and I've no documentation on this at the moment, so I don't actually know the difference between mode 1, mode 2 and mode 0, other than mode 1 is the default. So I'm going to leave that just to mode 1, as I said, that's default at the moment. Okay, so if that's useful, I'm undecided at the moment. Special weather elements. So this should only be, with the fog, only be available when fog is present in the meta. There's no fog available in the meta at Manchester today, but if I do turn that up, it does actually seem to throw that in, so maybe a bug in there prior to release. Moving on then to the enable cirrus layer, that's pretty self-explanatory. You can turn that on and it would throw a high layer of cirrus up, and you can obviously select the sort of parameters that you want for that. You can see we're sort of making a milky white sky there. Again, though, my default weather engines tend to be able to throw some of that in as well, so if you're doing this, you're always going to have a high cirrus layer on there, which isn't that realistic. So is it worthwhile having? Again, undecided. Interested to hear your comments on that. Let me turn this off. Right, now going over to the side of the app that I really want to see work as well as it did in the original REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, and this is the cloud elements and visual cloud enhancement. So many of you in the past for Flight Sim 2020 and also Flight Sim 24 have always said that the clouds can be a little bit harsh in terms of their coloring. They can be really rather dark, more like volcanic ash clouds rather than nice soft cumulus fluffy clouds, and the way that they are shaped isn't always accurate. REX Atmos in 2020 did an amazing job, and if you just look at some of these on-screen comparisons between the sim in 2020 without REX Atmos and then with REX Atmos turned on, the difference literally is night and day in its quality, and this is the kind of thing I was hoping for Flight Sim 2024's version of REX Atmos Core. Well, let's just jump back in here, and if we look at the visual cloud enhancement, at the moment it is turned off. I'm going to whap it all the way to the top and see if we actually get any difference. So a very, very slight difference. You just saw it change a little bit there, but I felt that the original REX Atmos did more, and I've obviously wound that pretty much up to the top. If I just take that back down, you'll see I'll maybe put that in the middle, so you can see it's definitely doing something. Am I bowled over by the difference? Well, not at the moment, but that could just be the particular live weather scenario we've got here. We'll check out different ones later in the video, but the visual cloud enhancement, I'm going to leave that turned right up to the top. The cloud luminance then, so basically how bright and dark the clouds are. We have to be a little bit careful with this because we're in the middle of the day when I'm recording this, so the sun's really high in the sky. It's the lightest it's going to be. If I then turn this up, you'll see that if I turn that up to the full, you'll see that it is now quite bright, well, the brightest it can do, and the cloud luminance, if we turn that down to the bottom, you can see then obviously goes a little bit darker. Again, today we've got just white fluffy cumulus clouds, so you're probably not going to see too much difference there to begin with, but in the past I do remember having to turn this up in Flight Sim 2020, so I am going to leave that just sort of here. Now there are two other ones here, the buoyancy factor, and I don't think I've ever seen anything as useless. So if I turn this on, well, please somebody tell me what the point of that is. Not bowled over at all by having that available. It just doesn't really, it doesn't even need to be there, does it? So we'll just leave those as they were. Okay, so I'm just going to leave those as a settings. I will save this and we'll then move on. Okay, so let's move on to the atmosphere, and obviously we're going to have to create one as it's brand new. Here we are then, we've got the atmospheric simulation and we've got the particle emulation. And again, for those of you familiar with the REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, you might be looking at this and thinking there is a lot more there to tinker with than there was originally. And again, you would be right. And again, I actually found this really frustrating. Let me explain. So bring this over here just out of the way. So we've got the atmosphere depth and we've got the scattering height. Well, let's just show you one extreme to the other. Let's turn it all the way down. and obviously you can see the atmosphere's disappeared. If I turn that all the way up, well, that's useless. So what became very frustrating very quickly is the fact that we've got these sliders here which go from one extreme to the other, but in all honesty these sliders I think could have been maybe a quarter of the size with their values, just because over here is unusable, over here is unusable. So what you want to do is, as you can see, I'm actually moving this, there's very little difference. It almost, there's a threshold somewhere that sort of jumps and flicks things on and off, and again, just you can see I'm going closer to the left and then suddenly it all disappears. So I don't know if this is something that's going to be addressed prior to the final release version, but I do think that the way the sliding values are at the moment probably could be tweaked to actually make them a lot more usable. You can also see that as I am playing with this, I'm looking in particular up here at the blue sky in the background just to see how that's been affected. It's really not at the moment, so I'm just going to reset that and just leave it where it was. The scattering height, let's do something similar, so far left to the far right, and obviously you can see the changes for yourself on screen. So the scattering height, as I'm messing around with that, you can see there are changes in the sky, and what I'm looking for is to try and get it, well, quite bright and blue. I always found the sky in Microsoft Flight Simulator by default was rather too dark, so we just want to try and make it perhaps a little bit brighter, so maybe as bright as that. And then again, just checking the top one, the atmosphere depth, yeah, it doesn't really do too much. We'll leave that pretty much as it was. We've then got the Rally RGB. So again, let me show you how frustrating I found this. A slight move, awful. Let's put it back. A very slight move, again, awful. Let's put it back. There really was, for me, not much point in having all of these decimal points and values and things and the sliding scale being able to go all the way up there, because I mean that's just it doesn't need it. What you will find if you're anything like me is you don't want to be spending hours tweaking it by 4 decimal points of a placing to try and get the right color. You want a usable scale. This for me was not a usable scale, and I've clearly wrecked my sim, so let's just reset all of those to something a little bit more normal. If I do want to just maybe tweak the blue ever so slightly, but then it's just messing up with the ground textures and things as well because of the way the light is now scattering. In fact, no, I'm going to leave it. Let's just reset. The global scene illumination, then you can see that is probably quite usable because that does exactly what it says on the tin, and you've got a sliding scale there to set it as you wish. Although there is now a default setting in Microsoft Flight Simulator to do something very similar. Anyway, you've got the exposure compensation EV, and I've automatically by default got that set to minus 0.6 because I always found the saturation and the brightness of the sim by default was too much. So we've got that already anyway. So the global scene illumination and the overall light tuning may already sort of be taken care of a little bit within Microsoft Flight Simulator by default. We've then got this phase function. Honestly, couldn't actually discover what that did. There was very little difference in what was going on in the background. Then though, we're still not done. We've got all of these settings here, particle emulation, and again, it's the kind of sliding scale that just drives you insane because the slightest of touches and your sim is completely bonkers. Trying to match these up to get the perfect setting, not entirely sure how long you'd need to spend doing that. We've got the absorption, we've then got the scattering. So remember what I said, we've got lots of different settings available, and that's great. If you're looking to get that perfect picture, that most realistic photorealistic looking picture, and you are a professional with coloring, then I'm sure this is absolutely fantastic. But we want to fly, we want to jump in, we want to have a setting that we just know works, turn it on and sort of be done. That's what we got in REX Atmos 2020. We had less than half of these parameters to tinker around with, and the results were phenomenal. Now we've got, I think, too much, and it's really sort of spoiling the overall effect. Anyway, I'm going to leave that as it is, and we'll just save this. Okay then, so next we're going to go to the environment. Let's have a look how many different parameters there are to alter here. Not as many, and that is good. This is what I want to see, something simple and basic. So the environmental light tuning, I'll just drag that out of the way so we can have a quick look. Again though, we've got these sliding scales where the slightest of touches seems to affect things far too much, and if we dragged everything all the way over here, well, it's useless very quickly. In fact, we've turned it nighttime in the middle of the day. Let's reset those. So the sliding scales, really, they need to be sort of a sliding scale between here and probably about this sort of level, because everything else after that is just no good. You can see the difference that it makes just by the very slight tuning of it, and I can't use my mouse scroll wheel to sort of tinker it ever so slightly. It is just a sliding scale which they move very dramatically, which obviously isn't great. So there you are, you'll have to go in and play with those yourself. Let's just have a look at the other side. We've got the ambient coloring, scattering intensity. If we just have a look at that, so you can see the difference. So that's now obviously quite bright, lots of scattering there, very bright blue skies. Perhaps that's a bit too vivid. Maybe we'll just go maybe number 2, that's okay. And then we've got the scene coloring, and again we've got sort of a very similar sort of scale, but this one is much better. Notice we're talking in 0.1s, 0.2s, 0.3s, and it's only affecting things very slightly. This is good. I like this because it's easy just to tinker ever so slightly with that. Okay, so how long am I going to have to spend to get the perfect picture? Well, one of the first things you've got to check after you've tweaked all of your 3 different settings, you've got the weather, the atmosphere, the environment. You may have found the perfect weather, you may have found the perfect environment, you may have found the perfect atmosphere. What happens though when you turn them all on? At the moment, this is Microsoft Flight Simulator default. Okay, so let me now turn on the weather setting that we have just created. Let's do that. There you go. Let's now add in the atmosphere we have just created, and let's do that. And now let's add in the environment and see how that looks. Okay, that's not too bad at all, but have a look what happens when we now do this. Let's change the time of day and start to have a look in an evening. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think that the sunrises and sunsets look anywhere near as good as they did by default. Let me just turn all of the REX filters off. I personally already think that looks better, which is very depressing for me, because that is not how I wanted it to be. Again, going back to REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, the daytime, the nighttime, dusk, everything looked fantastic with those options turned on. It seems though that you need probably to get a different setting for different types of day and different types of weather, and that actually does make sense in the way that they've stacked this up, because if you do want to save a weather preset, let's just call this test, when you want to save it, it actually gives you a category that you've got to choose. And look, we've got categories for clear, foggy, hazy, partly cloudy, partly sunny, rain. I don't particularly want a category, I want a one size fits all, and that was doable in REX Atmos Flight Sim 2020. It seems that is not doable in the new version for Flight Sim 2024. So, if you watched my video originally reviewing REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020, you'll know in order to get sort of the perfect photorealistic setup that I was after, I actually found a photo of Geneva Airport and tailored it until the sim matched its colorings and how it all looked exactly. Well, that's what I'm going to do again here, and we are back at Geneva. And my plan is to make the sim, which is currently here in default, look like this picture that I found on the internet, which obviously looks very realistic, as it should do. So, can I get REX Atmos Core to make my Flight Sim 2020 look like this? Well, after about an hour of tinkering with all the various different settings, sliding each of the sliders to the smallest amount possible because of such the huge variance a small movement gives us, I still didn't get anywhere near the quality I did with REX Atmos for Flight Sim 2020. This is what it looks like by default, and this is what it looks like, the closest I could get after tinkering around with REX Atmos Core for Flight Sim 2024. Now this to me seems far too bright on the ground, but the sky looks perfect. If I get the ground right, the sky doesn't look right. And the way it affects the different colorings of the sim at evening and morning with the dawn and dusk colors, it just doesn't work for me across the board. This is the same Atmos settings I've just shown you, but with the sunrise, this doesn't look good. If I disable REX Atmos and compare this with default, well, I think that that default view looks far better. But again, this is all very subjective, and I'd love to hear what your views are. I did go and revisit my original review video for REX Atmos in Flight Sim 2020, and what I noticed was in the original version, all of these settings were clearly labeled. There wasn't that many of them. There was a much simpler interface, and everything there did a job, and it was there for a reason. You really could tinker it and get the precise thing that you wanted, and it seemed to affect the simulator much more in a positive light than this does. It didn't bombard you with clutter and so many options that you don't really need, whereas it had simple options and they all worked well, regardless of the time of day, regardless of the type of weather that you were experiencing. It just worked, and this is really frustrating for me, and I'm so disappointed that 2024's edition is not the same. Maybe it's because Flight Sim 2024 already has a lot of this already sort of built in, and that their weather engine and atmospheric engine is far more difficult to tweak on the fly, so to speak, which is what REX Atmos claims to do. So I'm left now sort of really thinking that the original REX Atmos, if you're flying in Flight Sim 2020, make sure you go and get that, because it is night and day and will improve the visuals so much in your sim. REX Atmos Core for Flight Sim 2024, you would need a different setting for different times of day, for different weather pattern and scenarios, and you're going to spend more time tweaking than you are flying, and I personally am against anything that requires you to do that, because how many people have got so many hours to spare doing that kind of thing? If we get a spare hour or two, we want to just jump into the sim and enjoy a good flight. We don't want to spend hours setting up the perfect visuals in order to get there. Now, I do get that all of this is completely subjective, and you may find that everything you've seen in this video and all the options are available are something you really want. I personally preferred the original REX Atmos and how it worked. Simple things to tweak in order to get that sim looking absolutely fantastic. That is not what it seems REX Atmos Core is about. A lot of the features as well from 2020 are not available in this new version in 2024, which again is rather disappointing, and that is most likely probably down to sim limitations. I really want to hear what you guys think, and if you have watched all of this video, a massive thanks, because it has been a long one, for which I do apologize, but I wanted to give you all a complete overview. And if you have just skipped to the end to see what my final thoughts are, then well, maybe you can tell that sadly I'm not impressed. And it really pains me to say that, because I have been waiting for this for such a long time, so I am left feeling disappointed. Really do want to hear what you guys think though. Leave a comment down below. Looking forward to reading those. Let me know your thoughts. Will you be getting this, or are you going to give this one a miss because you're quite happy with what the sim looks like already without any extra hours spent tweaking? A huge thanks to all of you for watching this very long review video. If you have enjoyed it, found it useful, please don't forget to leave a like, and of course if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on that notifications bell so you don't miss any of our future videos and of course live streams. Thanks for watching. See you all again next time.